Good evening, afternoon. Right, here is Mark's Yamaha SG200, classic old beastie, in for a refret, and it's going to get some Evo Gold frets. Look at this, got lots of markings and grime and stuff, but a beautiful old thing nonetheless. This is either signed Andy with a big parenthesis that didn't get finished, or it's Candy, whoever owned it. But yeah, it's a beautiful old thing, made in Japan, of course. Actually, I lied, it's made in Taiwan. The tuners are made in Japan, but the guitar itself is made in Taiwan. I didn't know that. I would have said that was a made in Japan, but look at this. The truth of the matter. Anyway, so yeah, glued neck. You can see the joint there. Just there it is. What do they made these? Mahogany, I'm sure. Really big, solid body guitar. This one has rubber. No, it's not rubber. Sometimes these have rubber, but quick knobs, but lightning to tune, fast tuner things. But they're a bit like the ones with rubber, but without the rubber. But they've got the grippy bit around there. That's solid, that is. And then we've got some other interesting knobs which remind me of something, and I can't think what that's from. Used that before. And yeah, so it's from the 70s. It's what we used to see on the Top of the Pops bands like Big Country, to name but one. I keep mentioning Big Country. Stuart Adamson played one of these. I know Midge Ure played a few versions of these somewhere along his career, and loads of other people too. And so you can see that they've got the heft of a Les Paul, pretty much. A little bit less because they don't kind of rise to the belly down there. So they're flat topped, but they're chunky, and they're much thicker at this end than an SG, for example. So they're more like a Les Paul weight. And they have a sort of symmetrical thing here, which is interesting because the SG has a bit more of a chamfer here and probably doesn't do that as much, the Gibson SG, whereas and it has less on the bottom, so it has a much bigger chamfer here. But anyway, beautiful old guitars, and this is in for it's getting a new bridge and a new stop bar as well. Now, you know these things are obviously different from the original, and Mark knows that too, and he's chosen to use modern upgrade or modern parts for his upgrade. So please don't give him loads of grief, or me for that matter, about changing away from original. Yummy. Yikes. Oh god, that is sticky. That's off. I'll get it off my hands. Now I'm going to have to tackle this with some naphtha. I'm almost certain. Am I certain this will be a nitrocellulose? Probably. For that age, I'm guessing. So let me get a bit of cloth and cut a bit off. So tonight, this afternoon now, all I'm going to do is I'm going to get the frets off, and I think we probably also will need to take the nut off. Now the nut, I'll show you up close in a minute. The nut itself is a beautifully made thing, and I could quite well believe that Mark doesn't have any tuning problems with it. Who knows, but I need to ask him about that. So I think what we need to do is we need to remove it anyway for the fretting process, or the refretting process. So even if we just put it straight back on, we also then need to rework it from a point of view of the first fret action. Now the problem with my personal take on the problem with brass is that I find it very, very, very difficult to cut down the right first fret action and leave it totally non-grippy or non-frictiony. So since this isn't, this isn't going, what do you call it, untouched standard, all original, we're having a different, ooh, what's that? Oh, that's a bit of leftover glue on the side of the body. I thought, what's it doing to the finish? It's made a monkey out of me. But it hasn't. It's just where the finish ends up. And I've got some on my finger still. Right, so you can see there already, hurrah! That will evaporate. You can see there, you can see a clean, unscratched patch where the what do you call it, the Velcro was, but it's now gone, and the glue is gone, hurrah. And I think that alone will be a thrill for Mark, because I think he was sick and tired of the Velcro being there. So that's history. Okay, so yeah, with regard to the, let's push this along a minute. Sorry, with regard to the nut, yes, that's what I was going to show you. Here's the lovely nut, beautiful. I mean, brass, beautifully fitted. I haven't heard any pings and twangs trying to tune it, but I've only tuned it up once. But we shall see what he wants me to do, and that's not critical for right this second. But I do obviously need to be ready to take it off, because I've got to get the frets out, and I don't need that nut out to take the frets out, but I will need it to refret. Okay, so I guess the first part of this whole thing is, let's just interrogate the nut just for a second. Let's just, ooh. Yeah, this was doing something weird, wasn't it? What was it doing that was weird? Wow. That, whatever that is, that's weird. What's that doing? I seem to remember some, I think this could even be slightly backbowed. No, maybe not. So I get a feeling that's well fitted, and that's fine, because since it is well fitted, what I'll aim to do is, if we're going to replace it, just looking for my, there it is. If I replace it, reuse it, then what I'll aim to do is to put it back in as is, without touching the slot. But I won't touch the slots anyway, because with new frets, that's going to need to seat higher. So what we'll have to do to make it work at all, if we use the same nut, will be to boost it from underneath, probably with a piece of brass. And that's not too impossible, since I have some very thin pieces of brass here. They're very shiny to begin with. So, all right. So what I'm going to do is, I think I'm going to start by taking the strings off. Somebody's using a car wash. I'm putting the damn car down there, and they're going to spray all over it and come away with bits. So the reason I don't do any real measurements at this point is because everything's going to change from this point onwards. So refretting with new frets, they're by definition going to be taller than the existing ones. Otherwise, there's not really that much point refretting. So you need to bear that in mind. The question about what gauge do you go? Well, I've gone for a gauge in Evo Gold, which is the closest I can get to the width, the same width, to keep that familiar. But it's higher to begin with, obviously, but it gives me plenty of room as far as fret leveling is concerned, which is never a bad thing. So we've got the two. Let's take these bits all out for now, just so partly so we can clean around everything, and off come these bits, thumb wheels, if they come out. That one's struggling a bit, but thank you. Left and right. Filth. Yes, somebody's doing. They come. People who work here come back after hours to do their cars. We should think what's going on right now. Oh, normally is. Anyway, okay. So I'm going to sort of have a close-up look where you can see the where this thing's been played for many years, and they're really big notches there. They're fully worn out. Everything else is notched as well. It kind of makes you ask. Some people say, and I don't know the answer to this, so I'm just putting it out there, but some people say that when a guitar is played all the way up, you know, when it's really fully played over a long time, that any flattening out is even, so it takes it down in an even sort of way. But here we're seeing these notes when they're played up here, they're notching. Obviously it's not quite as deep as these, but it's not doing it in a sort of uniform flatness all the way across. So when somebody talked to me about or suggested that, I wasn't 100% convinced that that was what happened. I tend to think it's more like somebody's leveled them when they're low, but very evenly low. Sometimes people have been told that it hasn't been leveled, so they tell me it's definitely not been leveled. But then I think, how could just excessive play over the years, how could that result in this these frets being just completely even all the way across? Okay, so I'm going to have to tap this off. Whether we like it or not, it's got to come off. And there are no seals, or there's nothing to cut through in any particular place. You know, if there was, my experience is, yeah, you can try and get in there and see if there's any finish to cut. But actually, as soon as you start doing that, you start splintering the finish anyway. So if it's over glued, then you find yourself upsetting the finish anyway. So this is put on with some quite soft looking glue, which is okay. We'll tidy that up. So we know that's a good start point. We know the slots are good, and we could definitely shim this with a piece of brass, because if we're going to use it, that's what we'll have to do. So we'll put that off to one side. Okay, so before I start refretting, one of the things I always want to do, and it kind of makes real sense, is to, let me zoom out, is to test the truss rod. There's no point in going through the process of refretting a guitar if the truss rod doesn't work, because you'll be spending time and money on something that's not going to give you any benefit, or you may get lucky, or you know that if it's not adjustable, you have to hope to get lucky on the amount of weight pulled by the strings. Now this is going to have fairly light strings, I think, which is what it originally had. So what I'm going to do is, it was a bit long, so I'm going to use this one, and I'm going to put some turn into it, and I want it a bit backbowed. Now it's not really doing much in the backbow, but it is turning, and I would say it's working. So we'll put a bit of extra welly in with a shorter thing. Yeah, that's a bit backbowed. There is not an absolute ton, but there will be enough to counter some, will there be enough to counter, Sam? What's the word I'm looking for? There will be enough to counter string pull. Okay, so that works, so that in my mental check off list, that says to me, right, it's worth refretting or working on or investing time and money on. So that's the first sort of hurdle cleared. And the next one will be, or now what I'm going to do is I'm going to prepare this for fret pulling. And for that, I'm going to do a couple of things. I'm going to get my soldering iron warmed up, and I'm going to get some blades. I'll probably get a few more spare ones in a minute. I'm going to get my fret pullers. And it's funny that when people speak to me about this, they often say, why don't you use those fret protector strips? And there's one here. I spent money from Stu McDonald. Now, the point about these is that if you use these at all, you have to get the fret lifted first. So as soon as you've lifted the fret, the truth is you've already, you will have damaged any of the rosewood. If it's going to come out at that point, it'll come out. So that's the first thing. So for you to be able to get the fret protector strip under there, you have to have lifted it. Now I'm wetting the board at this point in time as well, so just let me do that. I'm doing everything I can to begin with to hopefully make removing the frets easier. But the fret protector strip, if I can only get it under the fret once I've started lifting the fret, and after which point the damage, if there is going to be any to the rosewood, has been done, then all you're really asking yourself is, what is the fret protector strip doing for me, if anything? And the question, or the answer for me would be, all it can be doing is, if there are chips, it maybe helps to keep them in place. But let's imagine you finally get the fret out and this is still on there holding the chips in place. Then the idea would be you have to spot them and then tack them all down with super glue. And in my experience, it almost never works well that way. I've tried it before. So I would rather, my personal thing, these are well fitted. I can feel it straight away. This is, blade really doesn't want to go under here. So that's the first tell. When this, my sort of blade removal method is such that I try to start the lift of the fret with a blade. It's not gonna, doesn't want to do it. I try to use a blade to go under the crown so that I can get the first bit lifting without digging into the end of the fret, or the fingerboard, which I'm afraid these tend to do. At the moment, these are sometimes the case with the very first fret, but for some reason the first fret is resisting my attempts, and then it breaks the blade. You've got to have a confident grip to hold that without slicing your fingers. This actually did get that lifted, right? But I just wanted to start it, because then what I want to do is I want to put a bit of heat onto it. If there is old-fashioned water-based glue or something that might respond to being warmed up a little bit, you can see it bubbling there where the fret gets warm. And then I'm going to aim to lift this up, so it still hasn't lifted it very much. So I'm going to go under there again and give it a pull and go at it again. There we are. Ooh. So I come around the side here. This is where it gets a little bit fiddly with my back to front soldering iron, and I'm holding the fret, putting the warm bit on top of it, and then I'm going to sort of gently, there goes the, going to gently nibble my way along the fret. So this is putting quite a bit of heat into there, so it should be enough, and then come to the end and lift out. So that's pretty good. that's all the way out. I'm just going to tuck that around there, even back to front. Yeah, that's pretty good. That's what you'd expect. There's no actual flakes coming up with that, even though it's very tightly down. It's gnarly around the place where the tang diamonds go in, as you can see, and that needs to be cleaned up. There are little tiny bits there which are they come out from those little bits, but they'll be covered in the new tang anyway with the new, by the new crown. So I don't worry about those. So the next bit is to let's try this, a little bit of heat first on this end, see if we can get this lifting straight away on this edge. Previously, I've always found that when you have to dig in with the actual tool itself, the fret, that is actually working, but it's destroying these a bit too much. They're not as strong as others. When you used to have to use this tool to bite the end, it would put a crimp into the wood, which was not ideal. So this slightly destructive process that eats up blades and requires you to be confident in handling naked blades, I still use it as a very effective way of getting these things going without digging in. That's the thing I don't want to do. I don't want to dig into the end of the fingerboard here, because that leaves you with a thing that you either have to radius out to fix or live with, and it makes the end just look that little bit untidy. So in a minute I'm going to go to my blades amnesty box and get some fresh ones, because they're just going to keep breaking. Oh, these are snap-offs anyway. I don't really want snap-offs. I want all these spares. You should see the sheer millions of blades I go through in this place. Oh my god, a whole pile of them. They're all snap-off blades. Don't I use anything but? Oh well, evidently not. Well, there's one that isn't. Oh yes, it is. Oh well, I'll keep breaking them. What the heck? Let's just keep breaking them. So the blade, jeez, that really is tight. The blade goes under the crown, and the idea is it's just enough to give me a start, but it is not doing it. It doesn't want to do it. So I just have to keep on going. There might be a better type of device for this lifting part, but so far it's turned out that this works, and all I need is that much to get me the initial start of the lift, and once it's there it will usually behave itself after that point onwards. I might want to wet the fingerboard again. So remember, this is also back bowed, so bent backwards. So the idea of that being that if possible, we're just helping we're reducing the grip of the wood onto the fret diamonds or the tang. So that's the idea. There you go. There's the little start point. That's good. So it seems dangerous and clunky, but it's really, I wouldn't do it any other way now, I'm afraid. I just don't like the amount of force and destructiveness that you have to do to get a bite with these dedicated pliers. And you can see obviously that if it's struggling to get even a blade underneath the crown of the fret, you can imagine that it's not going to let that, not going to want to fit that pliers under there. So that's good. I can feel it. That little bit of heave ho brings up the end, and away I go. Okay. So there's, as we go through this, I'm going to leave this till the fret wire comes in, which it isn't yet. It should be tomorrow or worst Monday. But there's no rush on this guitar because Mark is away for a month, I believe. So we're not rushing. That's a nice thing. So the stages on this will be to check in with Mark once the frets are out. And the question I'm going to ask is first of all about the nut. Does he want to keep with the original brass, or which will have to be slightly shimmed, or does he want to go with the adjustable tusk, which will obviously look different, but will be adjustable, obviously. The other question will be is whether he wants the surface of the fingerboard leaving as is, or whether he'd like it refreshed stroke re-radiused. Now there's a couple of chip outs here on this one, and they don't really, well, they do bear a tiny bit of relation to the little pieces, shards, but there's no way you'd stick those back in. So what I would do in this case is I would wait until I'd cleaned up the surfaces with a special tool that I have made, custom made, and then I would go and use little tiny dabs of rosewood dust, which I've got, or I can get from another piece of rosewood, and I would then, see, this is much easier now, these are all starting much easier. I would then do a super glue and rosewood, but the problem is with that is if you're going to do any fixing, you really want to be in a position to re-radius the board. That's the best way to fix and get a clean finish. So it's very difficult to do that without re-radiusing all over. So, like I say, quite a tricky question. The idea that you just pick these little shards up and glue them back in and they just drop into place without any argument is, in my experience, just doesn't happen. They don't want to sit down tidily. They stick to your finger, they stick to the cocktail stick you're trying to use, to do anything but sit flush where they came from. So I prefer to fill with dust and then sand back. And in this case, it may only be a small amount of extra sanding required, but I prefer to do that. The best finish, if you've got things to repair, is to be able to then lightly re-radius the whole board. And that makes it look a lot newer, whether that's something you wanted or not. That's what the result is, ends up looking newer. A plus from my point of view is that when I re-radius the board, I have more control over being confident about the surface being ready for the refret. When I don't re-radius the board and I use a sort of spot sanding to clear up this crunchy stuff, I don't have much more control, or don't have a lot of control over the rest of the shape of the condition of the fingerboard. So anyway, okay. Now you get down to this end and you can lift them, but you haven't got the room really, so you have to end up doing them one at a time at this point. Now, I'm not at all convinced that heat actually does really much. I could, for a test, I could do a whole load without and a whole load with and compare the results. I'm not sure really they'd be any different. I mean, this is losing the little flaky dry bits where the diamonds, the tang diamonds, have gone in. I do not believe there would be more damage than that if I didn't use the heat. So like I said, you know, in order to use this, I now have to be in the place where I'm shoving this under here, but it can't go any further than that, right? Because it's obviously this is in too tight, so in order to lift this I have to push that up a bit more, then I have to push that along, but it won't go any further, then I have to pull this a bit further, then I have to push that in a bit further, and it really is not, I can tell you it's not doing anything worthwhile. It's one of those things that StewMac will sell you because you're living in fear of damage when you refret, and so everybody is, but it isn't going to save you from it, I'm afraid. It just doesn't work out that way. Now this lifting business works best when you can get a longer section of the blade under the crown, obviously, and you can get that first lift up. Are there any advantages of leaving the original look stroke finish on the neck? Well, I would say only cosmetic, you know, that it has a sort of vintage look about it, which obviously appeals to some people, and you know, some people will like because of its bloody hell, its historical sort of mojo. Whether that is worth the exchange for that sort of unevenness is anyone's guess, really. My little custom-made sanding tool will take care of the crunchy line around the fret slot pretty well. And the idea is it's very thin, so we won't go outside of that wherever possible. The good thing about a unbound neck like this is we can take care of the fret cleaning, the slot cleaning much better than if it was a bound one. And actually that's quite a big bonus. One of the things that always makes me nervous about, a little bit nervous about refretting, pulling frets and refretting bound necks, is that because of the binding you can never get a clean run through with a saw to clean the slot out or to make sure it's wide enough, whereas with this unbound neck you can draw a saw all the way through here. Obviously you've got to be very careful up here, naturally, but it's doable. So again, I'm pushing this blade as far under here as I can before I do the lifting part like that. So this neck fingerboard will need to dry out as well, but that's okay because I'll leave it overnight and it will dry out. Yeah, so the benefit of leaving it and not re-radiusing is pretty much that it keeps its original dark look. If you do a re-radius, you have the positive of being able to control the condition of the underlying or the surface that you're fretting into. That's kind of an important bonus, but you pay for it in losing the original sort of mojo, dark, aged look that wood does when it's been played in smoky clubs for 40 years. So anyway, it's entirely up to the customer what they want. One of the things that takes a decision out of my hands, if you like, is if a customer says, look, I want you to, let's say there were no dot markers on there. The customer says, I would like you to refret this, and I also want, I don't know, mother of pearl markers down the fingerboard. Now, you can't, first thing is you can't really, practically, for all intents and purposes, you can't install new fret markers once you've already fretted the guitar. You maybe could, but it's a hell of a lot of work and it will never look great. And no guitar like these ever had the fret markers put in after the frets were in, and the reason for that is that you put them in, they sit proud, you let them firm up. There's a chip there that needs filling later on. Maybe not. Yeah, you let them. Yeah, you put the dots in, you let them glue until they're set, and then you use the re-radiusing or the radius block to sand them back level with the radius, and that then makes a completely flush finish, and they feel, you can't detect them with your finger. If you try to put them in between frets with the frets already in there, you get them in, they will always either stick up, or worse yet, they will sink into a hole if you drill the hole too far in your attempt to make it exact, which you'll never get. So you'll end up with them sitting too far, and you'll have a gap then, which is terrible. It looks awful. So you always have to fit them flush. No, not flush. Proud is the word I'm looking for. And as such, you always then have to cut them back, which is impossible to do without the radius block. You could try and scrape hard between the frets with a blade. You may get it eventually smooth, but you then would be forced to try and clear up the blade marks with sandpapers, and then you can never get right to the fret, up to the fret with the sandpaper precisely, so it'll always look a little bit like it's falling short, and it's just not as nice. So if somebody ever wants dots added later date, I'll always say not unless you're refretting at the same time, because it just won't work as trying to fit this in between your existing laid frets. Now this is running out of room here, as you can tell. I'm trying to get a bit of a twist turn on this. It's just breaking. It's breaking. I'll try and do it just on the edge of here. That's okay. Just had it enough to get it lifted, thank God. Right, so we're nearly at the end of the removal point. Now what I'm going to do is, by the time when I'm ready to slot saw to clean out these things, I'm going to obviously cover up the finish of the guitar as thoroughly as possible, bearing in mind that if it's a vintage, what do you call it, that stuff, vintage, what's the word I'm looking for, vintage nitro, then it may be very thin and delicate, in which case we don't want it to break or come off with any tape. So this one is definitely going to provide me with some challenges. Sorry about the camera view for a minute. Don't really have any other kind of things that will go under there. So that's a little bit tricky, because ideally I want to be able to twist it, but I can't really get very good. Oh, I've got it lifted. Yeah, I can't get a very good twist on it with no access reach, but we got there in the end. Hurrah. Now, because this is a set neck guitar, what we aren't going to be able to do is use the fret press to fit the new frets. It's going to be a tapped thing. Now, somebody asked me a question, I think last time, is I don't use the hammer to tap frets. I don't know why, it's just not my thing. I prefer to use little blocks of wood, which is like hitting them with a hammer, only actually they're slightly radius bits of wood, so they make a slightly better, I think they transfer the force a little bit better. It sounds noisier, but it works. So what I'm just going to dig out for a second is one of my little tools, and it's a piece of fret wire that has the tang. It's a piece of jumbo fret wire. Oops, sorry, has the tang removed, and I'm going to see if I can just cue you up to see what I do. And what I tend to do is it has a piece of double-sided sandpaper, or glued on sandpaper there, and so I can, it's got a radius on it as well because I pre-bent that, and so I can use that to sand out just wide enough, if you like, to get rid of the gristly, grindy stuff at the edges of the slot, because there is quite a build-up of detritus and glue and gunge, but of course this doesn't last very long, so it gets pretty mucky to begin with. I should also do a little bit more filing of this down to get rid of the thing. So anyway, that's what I'll do with this. I'll just work my way along, and then by the time we get to the new fret wire, it'll pretty much sit on top of most of that. You may just see a tiny little bit of the sand marks, but it's a price we've got to pay to get the surface right, unless we're going to resurface the whole lot, which I can check with Mark on that. Now I'm just going to do a quick test on here. The previous frets have a tang width of anything between 62 and, depending on where they are, 62 on the thinnest parts, and it can go up to 80 on the diamondy bit. So I'm going to mark that down. So this is the Yam Tang. Yam Tang is 80.60. So what we really want, of course, is a 60 slot. And the great thing about that is we have fret saws that we can use, and if the fret saws are too thin, we can use something else to widen it. And there are different ways you can widen it without having excessively expensive tools. Now, one of the things about this fingerboard, which I'm now going to, by the way, just take the relief, the back bolt out of it, so I'm going to slack off the truss rod. One of the things about this is it's not a bound neck, but it has end fills down here, so it's kind of tidy in that the fret ends have been filled. Now the question is do you try and retain these and treat this whole thing as if it was a bound neck, which is doable. You can retain those end fills, and when you come to, for example, like this, clean out the slots, you find yourself cleaning all the way up to and including the end. Now the question for me about that is I might do that providing that the tang width is about right, or just about right, for the new frets. What I don't want to do is find myself having to widen the slots considerably without being able to run through. If I have to widen them, I'll go through with a saw, and then we'll either fill in the ends with a little touch of finish. One of the things I can do while I'm at it, if I need to know what the finish is on this, I can do a little test inside, for example, inside the truss rod cover here. So there's a little bit of overspill of paint, or over painting. So if I get me a tiny bit of cellulose thinners and I take it down onto the surface here, why is it it can never actually reach the thing you want? Yeah, put a little bit of cellulose thinners on it. Now if it's what's that stuff? Nitro, you would see it softening up the material. And is it going to do that in this case? I don't think it is. I don't think that is at all. That's crumbling a bit, but that's only because I've pressed it there. No, I think that's poly. That's interesting. So I can fix that with a poly. Sorry, I can, if I wish to fill the ends, I can fill them with a poly, hand applied poly, paintbrush applied poly, and then I can sand the whole thing back a little bit on the edges when I'm ready. So that gives me options. That was my little test, but there's absolutely nothing coming up from there that gives me any feeling that this is nitrocellulose. It's polyurethane of some kind. Okay, I think that's probably going to be it for today. I'll go and find out my bits of information I need to find out from Mark. When I get the frets, as I say, I'll do the test about the slots. I do have plenty of Evo Gold fret wire here, but I think the one I've gone for is the second tallest type. I'm not sure if 220 thickness, 320, I don't know what that means. 325 width. This is from the days when I didn't record things very cleverly. 10 minutes Evo doesn't tell me anything either. Hello, somebody. Total tang width 54. Now that's something else. This is a tall one, second biggest. I think that's what I'm using. Right. I didn't know its correct absolute name, but let's see what the tang width is. Okay, so the tang width is a little bit wider on this one. The crown width is 275. That's what I expect. It was 290, I think, on the original one. 270. So that's fine. So we just have a very slightly wider tang. So for me, to make this really work well, I'm going to want to widen this. So that means I'm going to want to go through the slots. So I think we're about 78, 77 at the thinnest. We're probably about 85. So I think between about 75 and 85. Can't be exactly sure. It's quite hard to see where the thick and thin ones. Oh well, now it's showing me 60. 62, 63. Well, we had 62 on the other one, didn't we? Yeah, 60. So this might be just fractionally bigger. It's difficult to know. So we're going to lose these little infills, that's for sure. So the first thing I've got is here is the sort of standard one that I use, but this is probably a little thinner than the actual one, although we've got to measure it across the sort of cut of the blades. So that's about 52. So what I would do is I would first of all cut in and cut the poly inwards, and the same on this end here if I can. So I've taken away the ends, and what I then am able to do is to that way ensure the clean slot. What I could do just for fun, this is actually, let's test fit one just for starters. Now first of all, I'm just going to double check the radius. On an old guitar like this, I don't really trust what it's going to say. It's sort of saying 12, but it looks a bit flatter than 12. So it could be something else. No, that's too flat. It's rounder than 12. No, sorry, it's rounder than 14. Is it 10? No, it's flatter than 10. It's just about 12, but it's not. It's 12 is the nearest. So that's interesting. So let me just go and bend this wire to 12. This is leftover wire from another job, so I'm pretty certain this is the second gauge wire that I've ordered. I could check my order, but I'm just going to test out with this and make sure I get the right sort of size. Yeah, so normally to widen it, I have some other little blades that I run through. Sometimes you get the feeling that you can widen it enough, widen the slot enough by manually kind of widening it with a blade that sort of just a few run throughs widens it, or you can do it with another blade. And as it happens, I think my hacksaw blade just happens to be exactly 65, I think it is, something like that. So I'm just nipping over here to bend this wire to 12. It's nearly there already. See where it goes to in here. Difficult to do. Right, that's not going to be 12, is it? A little bit tighter than that. Yeah, a bit tighter. So there. Very unscientific way of bending or measuring the bend. You just have to trial and error until it gets where you think you need it to be. You have to measure up against the radius guide. Yeah, that's pretty good. Now what I tend to do is I need to cut off about ½ an inch, which never gets bent properly. So that goes, that's your first ½ inch, and I'm just going to take a fret's worth away for now. So really I'm just doing this for now to assess the fret tang and get a feel for it. And what I'll also do is I'll just undercut the tang on here as well, so it's sort of looking like we're working with an actual fret, and that gives us a better, so that's not so bad to sacrifice a little bit of fret wire for the pleasure of learning where we are. So I'm just going to cut the overhang bit and trim it. Oh, I didn't need to do overhang really. Well, yes I did, because I'm going to infill the ends. So if you were going to make the metal of the fret go right to the edge flush, then that looks quite nice on vintage guitars, but for that you don't need to undercut the overhang bit. But if you want to fill it with some dark stuff and then cover the whole lot over with some poly, you can do what I'm doing, which is cut an overhang. It just depends on which you think looks best. This is obviously going to be aimed to have it as looking as it did before, as close to. Okay, so there's my, oh, one more little thing. When you do the undercutting, quite often it just bends slightly, bends the tang underneath. And I tend to just grip each one and avoid that. So then I put it in here like so, and I just get a feel for how it seats. And now I'm just sort of looking at it, as you can do down here, as well as me. Zoom in, I say, I tell you. See that? So obviously that's not going to drop right in, because it wouldn't anyway. You want some grip. What we don't want though, and this is the sort of the tricky bit that I guess people can get very nerve-wracked about, and that is if you don't make the slots wide enough, or if you don't recognize there's a difference between your slot, your new tang width and your old ones, and I'm just going to double check, measure twice. We got 65, we've got 63, 62, we've got 65, and we go, this is, whoops, this is showing up as, what did we say, 62, we're going, let's try again, 54, don't believe that, 56, don't believe that, 56, 68. So according to this, even at the widest parts, this is right. This should be a straightforward fit. We shouldn't have to widen this at all. Now, obviously what we will do by placing this in here, it's likely that we'll, actually I can feel it, it's a pretty good fit. What it will do is that it will make new bite marks, because it's not going to go in, the little diamonds aren't going to go in exactly the same place as the previous ones. So what you might be able to see is, I could probably refret this without using any glue at all, but I think I probably would use glue, because I sort of just, maybe, I don't know, I'd tap the first one in without it. If it didn't feel good to me, I'd pull it out and I'd use glue. So right now we could even do that part of it. Now, no, we couldn't, because I still want to do the cleaning the surface. Anyhow, and I want the decision on whether we re-radius or whether we use the existing condition of the fingerboard. If we were to re-radius, I would identify any of the overhanging chips and just put a bit of fill in there. And then if we were re-radiusing, I'd get all of that then cleaned back. So that's pretty good. There's my thing. I'm gonna, as I say, I'm gonna just clean this up, and off camera I'll get some more double-sided sticky tape stuff, sandpaper onto it, and I will start by, off camera, I'll just go and clean up all these little surfaces in case we end up, Mark wants to go ahead with the same old-fashioned fingerboard in between. All right, that's enough for today. I'll see you soon. Thanks for watching this first installment of the Yamaha SG200 refret.